read a lesson this morning from the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17. We read verse 32, and then we jumped all the way to verse 45 and concluded in verse 51. The title of my sermon this evening is Defeating the Giants of Our Lives. Kindly whisper the same to your neighbor. Defeating the giants of your life. You know, the challenge with the Anglicans, we are not really loud enough. I'm convinced we can do better than that. Defeating the giants of our lives. That's amazing. The book of 1 Samuel chapter 17, the whole chapter specifically gives us a story of David. At this point, he is a small boy who is sent by his father into the battlefield where the Israelites were fighting with the Philistines. And we find an image of a giant by the name Goliath. This was a huge man, a very strong man, as indicated in the Bible when you read the verse 4 of the same chapter. And a man who the Bible tells us that for 40 days he would wake up every morning very early and then go into that valley and begin to mock the Israelites, challenging them to bring them one person of their choice who would be able to fight with them. And of course, none had been found up to that time. It is at such particular moment that David went in his assignment, having been sent by the father, and found his elder brothers among the people together with the others in the war, worried, confused, and in great shame, for they all had not gotten the courage to face this giant. And it is from that particular background that we find our sermon this morning. At this point, we may define the giants of our lives as any strong, formidable opponent that you may face. It could be physical, it could be mental, or even emotional, and to some point, even spiritual. Praise be to God. And all of us, in one way or another, we have gotten a very fair share of our giants in our lives today. Some have disappeared, maybe by the power of the Lord. Others, we are still fighting with them. Others, we are still facing them. And the major purpose of these giants in our lives is to ensure that we lose. Praise be to God. Losing faith, losing hope, losing our strength, and losing our sight into Jesus that we focus. And at times they make us understand that this battle is not worth it for us to fight. But this morning we are given a very wonderful study by this young boy here, David, on the principles to defeat our giants. And I invite you to dive in with me today as we focus on the principles to defeat our giants in our lives. And the first principle I want us to reflect is having a willingness to step in the gaps. Praise be to God. Having the willingness to step in the gaps. We find that most of the times when we are faced by these giants and these opportunities, that we got into panic and all we think is quitting and leaving and letting go. It is not a new incident in our midst and in our community that we hear each and every day of people committing suicide, people quitting in life literally, just because of a little challenge that faces them. The Lord calls us, as this young man David, to stand and to be willing to stand in the gap. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. And from the verse 32 of the first Psalm of 17, we hear David saying to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine, for I, your servant, will go and fight him." And that is the spirit the Lord is calling us to wear in our hearts, that as we face the challenges that life may bring, then we are not having any reservation that this is a battle we are fighting, and you are fighting it to victory. May the Lord help us to always be ready and willing to stand in the gaps as we stand on the promises of God. The beauty of the Lord in the battle is that he have already won, and he calls for you and me to stand in the victory. May we be counted as the willing people to stand and to step in those opportunities. And the second principle is that be confident of your testimonies, of your former testimonies. The verse 34 of this said that when David came into that battlefield and he found everybody speaking of how mighty this giant was, of how unshaken he was, he changed the whole narrative and he began giving a testimony that when I'm in the field taking care of my father's flock, sometimes the bears and the lions come and I am able to strike them down. And the Lord who helps me to strike and to overcome them, he will rescue me even unto this giant. We live in a life as believers of the former testimonies that God has done for us. And I believe all of us, none is without a testimony. None is without a journey they have walked with the Lord. And those are the testimonies that you need to refer to them as you face your giant today. Be it the giant of sickness and diseases, it is not the first time you're getting sick. The Lord who healed you will walk with you into the recovery process of your disease or your situation. Remember to be confident of your testimony. We are reminded in Revelation 12 verse 11 that they defeated the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and by the words of their testimony. Ask your neighbor, do you have a testimony? Does he or she look like she have one? Praise be to God. Be confident of your testimony. The same Lord who did it is going to do it for you even this today. Number 3, a very powerful trait that we find in this young man is to replace your fear with faith. Bwana sifiwe. Replacing your fear with faith. Verse 37 says, "The Lord who rescued me from the paws of the lions and the paws of the bear will rescue me from the hands of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Praise be to God. One thing I love about being Anglican is our greetings. The Lord be with you. The Lord be with you. Somebody was telling us, why do you throw Christ to each other? The Lord be with you and also with you. Praise be to God. This man, David, knew that this giant in the history of time had never won even a single battle. Praise be to God. Yeah, Goliath has never won a battle that is known. It was only the structure and the state that he was in that automatically, maybe if I may use the word, sowed fear. Praise be to God, in quotes, to those who were his opponents. And David refused to come there in fear, but replaced it with faith of the Lord who goes with us everywhere we go. Some of our challenges in life are an illusion of what we think and what we fear most. But when we start in the faith that this is the doing of the Lord, and that the Lord is within this situation to bring a testimony. I refer to the story of Lazarus, where Jesus would tell his sisters that his death or this sickness is not for death, but to give glory unto the Lord. How high is your faith, and how high is your fear? We have not been given a spirit of fear, but we have been given a spirit of faith, that whoever believes, the Lord is going to walk with him. David demonstrated this character very boldly, and indeed, the Lord walked with him. Replace your fear with faith. And number 4, turn a deaf ear to the discouraging voices. Praise be to God. We live in a society whereby the highest percentage of what we do is communication. And even to those in school, in the universities and the colleges, communication is one of the common units that you find in whatever course that you take, and probably even a compulsory one. Praise be to God. And you're most likely to hear 2 types of voices: a voice of encouragement, a voice that believes in you, or a discouraging voice that do not have the power to believe in you. And it is good to know that you cannot thrive or grow in a voice or in an environment that doesn't trust you in any way. And unfortunately, sometimes we find people being so negative on what we believe that can be done, on what we believe that we can. And maybe you share it with somebody, and those people discourages you and really shows you how impossible that journey is. And sometimes you're really strong in believing yourself, but the voices you hear tells you that you cannot make it. There's a song that is called The Voice of Truth by the Casting Crowns. And there's a stanza that says, among all the other voices I listen, I choose to hear the voice of truth, because the voice of truth tells me a different story. Praise be to God. And when David showed his interest, of course, to be in this battle and to stand in that opportunity, his brother Eliab in verse 29 scorned him and asked him, what are you even doing here? And the Bible tells us that David turned to another person. Praise be to God. And anytime that you turn a deaf ear, choose to listen to the voice of encouragement, to a voice that will raise you and raise your esteem so high that you're going to defeat the giants that face you in your life. David demonstrated that principle very, very boldly. And finally, be true to yourself. Tell your neighbor, be true to yourself. Being true to yourself. I was remembering, I think it's last year, when we had the election period. And one of my interests was the gubernatorial seat for Nairobi, between the governor current and the other opponent. And during the debate, the current governor had so many issues that almost everybody doubted of his originality in this. And one question he was asked for his opponent was, are you even Sakaja? Praise be to God. I don't know if you followed the same. And this man was building on the question of the fake papers as he was accused, and maybe he's not being active in the position that he held at that particular time. And he tried to show the people of Nairobi that this man is just but a mask, but not the real self. And that is why he asked him, is this, or are you still or even who you say that you are? And sometimes when Jesus was with his disciples, he asked them a similar question of who do people say I am? Praise be to God. And I don't know if you have ever asked yourself of who do people say you are. You might be surprised that they say you are who you think you're not. Praise be to God. Verse 39 of this text we are reading gives us an illustration of an incident that happened when David was now ready to go into the battlefield. And we are told that King Saul dressed him in his own tunic. He put on his coat and even the helmet on his head and fastened his sword on the tunic. And he tried walking around and he could not even be able to walk. And David just put down all that attire and wore his shepherd coat that he was used to, and carried the five little stones and a sling, and went to attend or to handle the giant ahead of him. The reason at times we are not able to succeed in the battle is because we do not really go with our own uniqueness. Praise be to God. We do not really go with our ability. We are so much tuned to be like somebody else. Our lifestyle, our dressing, our cuisines, everything we do is somehow not who we are, but who we try to be. The Lord created us all in our own uniqueness and our originality. And the moment you fake your reality, the moment you do not appear as you, just know in the back of your mind that you are robbing the world that which only you can give it. Praise be to God. May the Lord help us to face life in our own realities. When I was in high school, there was a high challenge of the leaking of the exams, the KCSE. And so many people miraculously passed. And some of them decided to take the high courses, depending on the marks they got. Praise be to God. Only to be surprised in the tertiary institutions. Every time you appear not in your real identity, you'll never be without shame. The Lord calls us for victory. And as I conclude, Exodus 14 verse 13, when the Israelites were almost giving up, Moses stood and told them, do not be afraid. Tell your neighbor, do not be afraid. And stand firm and see the Lord's deliverance. For the enemies you see today, you will never see them again. And that is my message to you, my dear brothers and sisters. Stand firm and do not be moved. And do not be afraid. See the deliverance of the Lord. And the giant that stands before you, you will not see it again. I bring this to you in the name of God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.